Ryan Joel here for All Access MMA, and my next guest picked up a big win over Eddie Wineland at UFC Vegas 19, and of course, it's John Castaneda. John, how are you?
I'm doing well, brother. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and wow, what a big win over a veteran, a guy that's been around for a very, very long time. This has to be the biggest one of your career, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just like you were saying, Eddie Wineland I think he's a legend of the sport. He's been around forever, the ex-WEC champ. He's competed for the UFC belt, most knockouts in bantamweight history. So, yeah, his stats speak for themselves, and it's definitely the biggest win of my career under the biggest promotion in the world. So it definitely feels good.
So what was the game plan heading into this one, and did that change at all when you got tagged early on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. The game plan was kind of just to use that first round and stick to the outside movement, a lot of movement, and kind of just figure out his timing. I know that Eddie's got a really tricky style to figure out. He's got kind of like that old school boxing, and honestly, at first the game plan was to use his low hands to our advantage to obviously land shots. But to be honest, his style, holding his hands down a little bit lower than normal, his punches come in at a different angle, and obviously honestly a lot less telegraphed. So when he was throwing his punches from his traditional old school boxing style, they come a little bit more hidden. And like you said, I got tagged pretty early in the fight, and it kind of rewired my mind a little bit. My confidence kind of just went down a little bit, and I knew I needed to recollect myself, but obviously still stay on the game plan, the original game plan in terms of movement and kind of, figure out his timing, and once I was able to recollect myself, I was able to get a little bit more comfortable on the feet, switching from southpaw to orthodox. And, it was after that inside leg kick from southpaw to that little slight switch over to orthodox. And then I stepped over to the right, caught that clean shot, and then we were able to finish the fight there.
You've been at this for a while now. You got a very impressive record. This was your second fight in the UFC. When you get tagged like that and your confidence does get affected, what do you do? Like, how do you go about, I guess, recollecting yourself and getting yourself back in the position where you need to be to move forward and make any adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure everyone's different, but for me personally, I got tagged that one time, and how I was able to get my confidence back up is just kind of convince myself that, hey, you got a tight guard, like you got really good defense, good footwork, good head movement. And so just keep moving. And what happened was, after I kept moving and stopped getting tagged, because I only got tagged once, and it was a good amount of time between, I didn't receive another hit, a direct hit. And so I was like, okay, he got lucky, or he set up a nice shot, good for him. But remind yourself that, like, hey, you haven't gotten hit in a while now. You got good movement, you got good head movement, good footwork. This is it. You're back in it now. So that's kind of what it was for me. But like I said, I'm sure every fighter is different.
Now, obviously, you got to finish there towards the end of the first round. A lot of people thought that it was an early stoppage. What's your take on that?
You know what? Maybe it was, but I'm not there to make that call. I'm just there to fight. If the ref calls it early, that's out of my control. All I know is that I know for a fact that I hurt him with that right hand, which is exactly why you saw it. I mean, you saw it in his demeanor and in my demeanor. I was backing up and moving side to side for most of the fight, and all of a sudden I'm coming forward because I think he's not hurt. I knew he was hurt, and I saw the expression on his face, and I saw a little wobble in his step as soon as that clean shot landed. So I was able to come forward, and then he took 6-7 shots on the way down, and then a couple more when he was on the way down. He was working his way back up, but what is working up going to do? At that point, I feel like you're just going to keep taking shots and eventually go down once again. So in my mind, I thought it was a good stoppage, but I can see, and from a non-biased opinion, that it could have been stopped a little early.
Yeah, I'm not saying I thought it was an early stoppage. I actually thought it could have been a pretty darn good stoppage right there, but I just saw some backlash on social media, so I figured I had to address it. What's more important here is you got the win, and you're still undefeated in Vegas. So what is it about the bright lights of Vegas and the fight capital of the world that brings out the best in you?
You know what? That's a good question, because I want to know. But it's obviously good luck for me. I want to continue fighting in Vegas, but it all goes down to back in 2015 when I made my Vegas debut. Fought for a promotion called Combate Americas, and I think honestly, like, that's the first time I've ever fought in an outdoor like outdoors. So in 2015, I fought literally in the parking lot of the D Hotel. And for some reason, maybe that has something to do with it, like coming from literally fighting in parking lots to now we're fighting, in arenas for the UFC. So maybe, it's just good luck in whole itself.
Yeah, well, it's very, very impressive win, and can't wait to see you back in Vegas again here soon. One thing that I was really curious to get your take on, I mean, a lot of finishes on that night. I mean, that card was just full of great performances. But were you a little bummed that you didn't get a performance bonus there?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. We were keeping our eye on the fights, absolutely. So especially as soon as we got done with our fight, we did our interviews, and then we went right back to the hotel and started watching the fights. And after two more fights after mine, we were like, hey, a lot of these fights are going to the decision, or they're not really that exciting. Like, we weren't like obviously hoping for boring fights for the UFC, but we were just kind of watching and keeping in tune. And once we saw the main event, we were like, okay, well, there goes one of the bonuses for sure. You know what I mean? Like, he's getting one. And then we were kind of trying to pinpoint where the rest of the three were going to go. And I was like, well, I'm definitely a candidate for one, but I who knows? And I know I was a little bummed, but like you said, ultimately the most important thing is getting a win in the UFC and kind of establishing myself. There's going to be more opportunities to get bonuses and stuff like that. So, and you never know, maybe they'll hook it up with a little undisclosed bonus.
There you go. Well, you'll have plenty more opportunities to get that bonus, no doubt about it. Let's talk about your UFC debut. You got to go all the way back to July. It was in Abu Dhabi. Obviously, it didn't go your way. It was a short notice fight. You took it on short notice. You dropped a decision to Nathaniel Wood. Looking back on that fight now, is this just a case where you didn't have a full camp, you weren't fully prepared, and you just ran into a guy who maybe was a little bit more prepared on that evening? Like, what can you point to lessons that you learned from that loss?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, I definitely one of the biggest lessons I learned would just to obviously always be in fight shape, and I was in fight shape, but there is a big difference between constantly training and then training for a specific fight/fighter. You know what I mean? So I am constantly training. I'm no matter if I have a fight lined up or anything like that. I'm constantly in the gym, but it's the demeanor behind the training. It's the hours a day behind the training. You know what I mean? Like when I don't have a fight and I'm not in fight camp, quote unquote, I'm training 3 to 4 hours a day. But when I am in fight camp and I have a name and I have a specific style to train for, I'm in the gym double that, 6 to 8 hours a day. And I'm, doing 6 days a week. So there's definitely a difference there in terms of preparation, especially taking the fight on 2 weeks notice. So, if I could get that one back, that'd be great. But, hats off to Nathaniel Wood. I'm not throwing out excuses by any means. He's a tough fighter. He's always been on the cusp of breaking the top 15. So yeah, I mean, short notice or not, I'm grateful to have been given that opportunity, and I'm grateful to now obviously just at least be 1-1 in the UFC.
Yeah, no doubt. Abu Dhabi in general, like what can you take from that? What was that experience like? Because really, I mean, it was such a spectacle, and I think that they're probably going to go back. Like, is that something that you'd like to do again if you had the opportunity to run back there?
You know what? I would go back to Abu Dhabi, but the thing with that is, especially for like the first fight, it was very nerve wracking going on the opposite side of the world for your UFC debut against a top prospect. You know what I mean? There's just so many little factors that kind of wear on you a little bit, like, man, am I good enough? Like, I'm going all the way across the world, blah, blah, blah. I think the biggest thing too with Abu Dhabi is the difference in time zones. So leading up to the fight, the 2 days leading up to the fight, I got a total amount of sleep of like 4.5 hours. So it was pretty brutal for me in terms of getting acclimated. What I was going to say though is, would I do it again? Yes, but I would probably ask to go out sooner. I'd ask to go out, at least minimum of 3 weeks before the fight. And, I could do a little training there before the fight, but just to get 100% acclimated. Because 9 days is not enough. I'll tell you that right now.
I heard the heat is just insane out there.
100%. It's, you step outside and you're sweating. It's brutal.
Can you compare it to Vegas? Because I lived in California for a while, and I went to Vegas quite a bit. Is it similar?
I'd say it's the complete opposite. So it's like Vegas is like a dry heat, right? Like, we're in the desert. So Abu Dhabi is very, very humid. It honestly reminds me a lot of like Minnesota, because I'm from Minnesota, and we have an abundance of weathers here, or weather types. So when it's like really cold, like last week, it was -10, but with wind chill, it feels like -30, right? When it's super hot here, it's it's only 95 to 100 degrees, but with the humidity, it feels like it's 120, and that's what I would compare it to. It's just very, very humid.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess I'm not too envious of that. I'm all the way up
Yeah,
in England. We get the humidity, but our winters just last so long. I mean, if I
yeah,
turn my camera around right now, there's like a foot of snow outside. And
right. Same here. Yeah.
so, are you back in Minnesota right now?
Yeah, yep. I flew back that next morning. So on Sunday morning, went right back to training yesterday, and it feels good, honestly, because I came, I came out of that fight with little injuries, a little bit of a bruised knuckle, but still able to grapple and jiu-jitsu. So we're good. We, yesterday right back in the gym, and it feels good to get that sweat, right after that fight. So.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, back in 2017, you had a win at Dana White's Contender Series. Flash forward now to your fight in Abu Dhabi, and now you get your first UFC win. What has that grind been like for you to get back to the UFC? Because you were right there on the doorstep, and you got a win at Contender Series. You just didn't get into the UFC. How hard was that mentally to stay focused, to keep pushing forward, and ultimately make your dream a reality?
Yeah, no, it was definitely a little, you could say, demoralizing, especially at the time when, um, of the time of the Contender Series. I think I was on a 9-fight win streak, and I think that Contender Series would have been my 10th win in a row, if I'm remembering correctly. And so after I won the fight and I didn't get a contract, I thought to myself, like, man, what's a guy got to do? You know what I mean? But to be honest, like I looking back on it and reflecting on it now that, even before I was in the UFC, I agree, especially with that night, there was a lot of finishes that night. But also I was injured 3 weeks before that fight. So I wasn't in the best shape of my, that I could have been in. And to be honest, it's really showed in my performance. I could tell just watching the replay of that fight, and obviously during the mix of the fight as well, that I got tired pretty quickly in the fight, and it showed. And so do I blame them for not signing me? No, but like I said, it all boils down to obviously to getting the win, which was obviously important, which kind of kept me relevant. You know what I mean? Getting a win at least kind of kept me in the picture, and then it was that mixed with more fights with Combate Americas, and then obviously having really good management. And now we're here, and it's just another stepping stone. So now we got our first win, and now it's just continue to grind and keep improving, keep getting more wins.
And what has the pandemic been like for you as far as training, and has it altered like what you normally do on a day-to-day basis at all?
Uh, yes, and honestly, it's all been positive. So for us here in Minnesota, we've been able to we have different laws obviously than a lot of these other states. Some of these schools in other states have to close down completely, but us here in Minnesota, if you're a professional athlete, you can continue to train throughout the pandemic um, through your gyms and your, whatever, all your trainers necessary. So obviously being a professional mixed martial artist, that kind of counts in that category, right? So we've been able to continue our practices with like the pro MMA team at the Minnesota Martial Arts Academy. And I say that it's all positive because for a moment there, the school was closed down, but we were still having our MMA practices. So we really got to focus with our head coach, Greg Nelson, who's a legend of the sport. More focused, more personalized focus, more one-on-one. You know what I mean? He had for a while there, no school classes to run, no business, just focusing on the MMA team, which was obviously a blessing for us. It's basically like private lessons every single day. And then another positive of it is just everything's closed. Everything is closed here in Minnesota, or it's starting to slowly reopen back up, but everything's closed. So really, you have nothing to do. There's no excuses to be goofing around on the weekend. You know what I mean? You get everything, all the time in the world to focus on what you want to focus on. And for me, that was obviously mixed martial arts and my fights. So it's been good for me.
That's great to hear. And the weight cut for you, what is that like? Like, what do you typically walk around at? Like, what's the heaviest you get? Like, if you take a couple of weeks off and you eat what you want, like, how big do you get?
I'll just the start of this camp, I was 188. and and it wasn't like a ripped, jacked 188. It was, I was a little chubby 188er. That's like undisciplined, you know what I mean? And that's honestly still me training, which is surprising. That's me indulging in my fat boy habits, but obviously continuing to train. So um, I teamed up with the Twin Cities Orthopedics nutritionist, and obviously working with like a lot of the UFC Performance Institute nutritionists, and I'm changing a lot of things effective, you know, this last camp, and I'm trying not to walk over 160. So 160 is kind of like my max that I'm going to get from now on, making any like short notice opportunities a lot easier to make weight. And then also just like performing better, you know, when it comes to the fight night too, because obviously the less water weight you cut, I think the better performance you'll have that next day.
Yeah. And so 25 pounds of water weight, is that easy for you, or is that a grind? Like, do you really have to stay dialed in and focused to make sure you get that off?
So the most I've cut in water weight is actually only 11 pounds. So when I said I started this camp at 188, I lose a lot of that, obviously belly fat and, you know, all that excess weight through just dieting and discipline. And then the last bit, obviously I get as lean as I can. And then the last bit I cut in water weight. The most I've cut was this last fight, which was actually like 11 and a half pounds. So, and it came off just perfectly. You know, I did everything right. I water loaded the week prior. I did 4 pounds the night before weigh-ins, and then 7 pounds the day of weigh-ins in the morning. And it came off super early, like very, very quickly, to be honest. Like we hopped on the scale after an hour and a half, and I had already dropped like 6 pounds and out of the 7.5. So I was like super pumped about it, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. When you look at the other guys in your division, like, how do you feel you stack up right now? Granted, you're still very new, only your second fight in the UFC, but how far off do you feel you are from being considered a top 15, top 10 guy?
Not long, you know what I mean? And I'm pretty confident in the skills that I bring to the table. It's just all about performing, you know, and performing and making sure that I can use those skills. You know, I think the more experience, it's different because I do have like plenty of fighting experience. Like I have 23 professional fights. I had 16 amateur fights. You know what I mean? I've been in that cage quite some time, but the UFC is different. You know, once you know you're in the biggest stage in the world, fighting the best fighters on the planet, like it's a whole nother level that you have to get accustomed to. And like you said, I'm fairly new to the UFC, and I'm just going to continue to get more and more comfortable in the UFC octagon, and which will in turn be able to allow me to showcase more of my striking, my kickboxing, and my wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So I think that I line up well with a lot of fighters, especially a lot of these, you know, top 15 guys, and, you know, top 10 to top 20 guys. You know, I watch their fights. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the UFC too, you know, and I watch fights all the time. Especially, I keep an eye on my division, and I feel like I compare pretty well with a lot of these top guys.
So give me a time frame of when we can expect to see you back in there next.
If it were up to me, honestly, late next month or early, you know, early May, something like that. But it's all up to my management and, you know, what the UFC wants to do. But hopefully, you know, like I said, I'm staying healthy, just keeping my weight low. So just hopefully, you know, get a couple weeks notice and we'll hop back in there.
You don't seem like the trash talking type or someone that's going to like be calling people out left and right. But is there someone that you'd like to get in there next with? I mean, anyone come to mind, or do you not really care?
To be honest, it doesn't matter to me. I feel like I haven't had the easiest entry into the UFC by any means. You know what I mean? My debut was against a tough Nathaniel Wood, and then my second fight, you know, obviously fighting Eddie Wineland. So, you know, whoever the UFC and my management thinks and sees fit, I'm down for it. You know what I mean? So, no, I'm definitely not the trash talking type. To be honest, I think you have to earn the ability to be able to call people out. And to be honest, I don't think I've earned that yet. Let me get a couple more wins under my belt. We'll redo this interview again, and I'll give you a couple names then.
Sounds good to me. Quick fight prediction here. You got the title on the line here soon between Jan and Sterling. Who do you think wins this one?
I think Sterling is a beast, man. And I think honestly, like his grappling is just going to be on a different level. I see that he's training out at Couture's now too. Just grinding, man. And I think his pace and his grappling is going to be too much for Jan.
Okay, I can't wait for that one. I'm sure you'll be watching that very intently.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, listen, pleasure interviewing you for the first time. Before I let you go, tell people where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at sexymexy135, Instagram at John Castaneda _. And yeah, just Facebook if you want, John Anthony. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys and thanks for having me on the show, brother.